morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. Now, I've been thoroughly testing the midnight beta through multiple phases, and the purpose of today's video is to just give you an update on my thoughts and feelings so far for the expansion. What has the experience been like? What are some possible concerns, and what are some possible pros, as well with all of the changes that have been advancing through, because there's been a lot of them, and it's really tough to keep up with them. So I think it's probably just better to make a video about it and kind of summarize it and go over it. So the first thing that is changing dramatically in Midnight is the pacing of the game. So how fast a target goes from 100% health to 0% health. And that is equivocally the same across all content, PvE or PvP. And I think if done right, that this will single-handedly be the best improvement that is made to the game at this current date and time, because we have seen multiple iterations of the game where targets are at 100% HP and then quite quickly 0% HP. And if you don't properly use a cooldown or interact with a mechanic, you're just immediately dead and it's game over. So that experience is very jarring in a lot of cases and can be very frustrating for a lot of players who can't figure out what exactly went wrong, like what cooldown combination was used incorrectly, and it can be very frustrating, and it doesn't have a lot of intensity. And what it does to healers is that it makes them feel like, as opposed to healing people and recovering their health, you're a one-shot prevention. You're just sitting there like, there's only one chance, and if I don't stop this from coming in, the game is going to end. It all is going to be over. And that's like a heavy level of anxiety, as opposed to slowing down the overall pace of damage and making it so you spend more time in the recovery phase, which means more time in between 0 to 100%. And what I like to call this term is intensity. I feel like a lot of players, they throw the terms around with slow and fast. Like some people are like, I want slow gameplay, it's too fast, or I want fast gameplay, it's too slow. But I think intensity is a better word for it, because you can have previous iterations of the game that were quote unquote slow, like Battle for Azeroth. But to me, that wasn't slow, that was zero movement. You would be at full health or dead. That's zero movement. And it felt slow because there was, no movement from 100% unless you died immediately in one global. And usually it would take dampening in PvP to get to those points, but in PvE it was almost always just one mechanic just absolutely smacks you and takes you out. So in my PvP testing, there have been some bugs, but I will say I think happily at this point that the major bugs have been squashed. The first one was that trinkets were providing too much primary stat and people were one-shotting, and I believe that has been corrected as far as my playthroughs have been so far. The next one is that embellished gear was bugged, and you could like craft embellishments that could double stack, so you could have 8 embellishments instead of whatever the minimum requirement is. It's basically double the amount of stats, and so you would get fireballs that hit for 10 billion and games would end instantly. And I had a feeling that was going to leak over into dungeon testing as well as soon as people figured it out, but it was like RNG. But those two major bugs have been over, so now I've actually been able to play the game with the intended design front, and you can see moments like this where you come out of a mind control, target's at like 40%. If that was on retail, that target was probably dead. The game was over. But you actually get a little bit more time to recover. Your healing on that target's a little bit more effective. I am playing a Resto Druid in the clips for today's video. They've reduced the number of heal over time effects that you have, which at first I was a bit concerned about. But then at the same time, it's kind of nice. It's almost like going back to TBC, where you put a life bloom up and then there's other things that you can do. So like I can go after this siphon, I got my life bloom and my rejuve up, and there's other things that I can do and that I can accomplish in the match. And it's not so much just like spamming every millisecond of like, this is the red GCD, this is the red GCD, this is the red GCD. There's a little bit more time to be conscious and kind of think about what you want to do in a moment like this, where now I can get a cyclone onto the healer and we can kind of run down the target in that window. Now dampening is still scaling pretty fast. You can see it at about 50%. Right there, and that was like a third bug that I've been encountering. Although this round it's not starting at 10%, so I do feel like they've done a good job of snipping that, which is really important because I believe that a lot of them are going to be going on vacation pretty soon. So I would imagine that this data is still going to get collected from testing. So this is probably a very critical phase of people playing the game, whether it's dungeons or PvP, getting data collected, then coming back and looking at that data. So it's very good that those like major bugs were addressed before they left, because otherwise that data would have been completely corrupt, and who knows what would have happened with the release of the expansion. But I think across the board, it's all about making the healer role one that more people want to play. And I think by removing one shots, it will make more people want to play it. Because what I used to like about healer was healing. So like just thinking about the decisions I want to make, who needs my biggest heal, who's my priority. And I believe the style of healing would have been called triage. So you can see right now my warlock and my hunter are both at 50% health. So I'm making my decisions on how should I triage them. So the hunter looks like he's getting focused a little bit more than the warlock. So I'll keep my lifetime on the warlock and focus my rejuves there while maintaining some, exterior hots with rejuve, regrowth, and wild growth on the warlock. And I'm trying to anticipate, are they going to switch targets? Are they staying on this target? Do I have time to do damage? Do I have time to go for crowd control? And it's these types of calculations that you're making while maintaining triage that makes the healing role fun to me, as opposed to before where it's kind of just like everyone's at full health and here's their cooldowns. I need to use mine right now. And you need like a bunch of weak auras and sound alerts popping up in order to have enough time to actually react to the moment. And that doesn't feel like that's the case at the moment. Now, some classes obviously are overtuned, something like a Death Knight. But again, that's something that is going to be collected in the data. And I can imagine that either if they still have some people, I don't know if all of them are going on vacation, if some people are still there, that will be something that likely gets tuned as things go on. But the data will be collected regardless. And it does feel like they are making significant improvements week to week. So I think that's like, a major concern a lot of times is you go into a beta realm and everybody's like, oh, it's just beta. Don't worry. It'll be good while it's live. And then nothing changes. But it doesn't feel like that this time around. The initial testing phases were kind of very borked, very just like this is first draft. We're running through things like what's going on. Fire Mage has one ability, but they've been dialing back based on the feedback for a lot of specializations and enhancing those experiences so far. So I think as far as their goals, which is simplifying the classes so they're less intimidating, they're less global intensive, that they are moving closer and closer to that goal. So if you're a player who's returning or new coming back, the game isn't as intimidating in that sense, and you don't necessarily need as many add-ons. There was one improvement that was made in this patch, which hopefully will pop up here in this game, is that they show allied defensive cooldowns activated on the raid frames, which are these 3 boxes on the left. So you'll see if like the Demon Hunter uses Blur here, or if I use Iron Bark or Bark Skin, it pops up here. I don't like the location of it because it covers up my debuffs and my buffs. So like now I'm just like, how many dots does he have? How many hots does he have? I don't really know. It's hard to see. I'd personally prefer if that icon was like to the left of the frame. So for like a lot of healers are concerned that Omni CD is going away, which lets you know what cooldowns your allies have available. But at least you'll be able to see like they've activated a cooldown. And I would somewhat debate that they should show crowd control in these frames as well. So like even in PvE, right? If your tank gets stunned, you want to know that your tank is stunned. They're going to take a lot of damage. But in PvP, you want to know if your healer is crowd control because they're not going to heal you, or if you have some utility that can remove it, you're going to be able to see it because there's a lot of debuffs, right? Like seeing a trap or seeing a sleepwalk on top of these debuffs. I do like that the sleepwalk is slightly bigger here with these raid frames specifically, but I feel like maybe just moving crowd control to the left, moving cooldowns to the left of the frame, because there's already just so much going on when it comes to just debuff tracking and buff tracking towards the side, that it's just like this cooldown's nice that it's there. I just prefer that it's over to the left, and much to the same as based on the feedback with like the dispelling debuff icon color changes on the frames. They've opted for a setting so you can turn it off. I think they've added new borders that you can put on that show if there's curses and stuff like that, which I'll kind of have to wait and see. And I feel like this is still just a work in progress, but just talking through the things that I would like to see improved. The main thing is that if you're testing it and there's things that you think could be improved, let them know, because they have been very, what's the word? Like forthright? I don't know if that's the word. Like very readily acting on that feedback. When they get enough of it and it's justified in those instances. They've been very good on iterating on it. So I wouldn't feel as hopeless as I feel like a lot of people, at least at the moment, and you guys can let me know in the comments down below, aren't like hype about it, but I feel like it's just because it's still in the work in progress phase. We're still trying to figure everything out. Everybody's panicking. The sky is falling. Like the UI is completely getting revamped. They're just trying to do so much all at once that it does feel like it's either all or nothing. With the development of the expansion, but from hands-on testing experience, as far as like pacing of the game and intensity, right? I'm not talking storytelling or lore or anything like that. I haven't been as involved with that. For a lot of people, that is the entire game. So I could see if that's not delivered properly, that they would feel like their experience has been minimized. But I'm talking from like a gameplay side of things, which is that they're taking big risks and trying to shift the core gameplay, that those goals are getting closer and closer to being met. Now there still is a lot of players, especially high-end level players. I will say that this expansion is not directly catering to them, probably whatsoever. A lot of the top players are thinking that certain mechanics of their class means that those skill expressions are going to be lost. So for example, all the healers are losing their interrupts. But at the same time, when everybody has an interrupt, there's a lot of crowd control in the game, right? And another thing to note is that cast times seem to be a lot slower. You have a lot more time to react. So a lot less things to disrupt you, but a lot more time to react. So like this evoker can knock me back, knock me up, and blink away like that, away from my cyclone. So while they may not have an interrupt, they still do have mechanics that can avoid my cyclone in these situations without it being just like overbearing the amount of crowd control that's coming your way when you're trying to do something as a healer, or just as anybody in the game. So I think that change, even though it is nice as a healer to have those interrupts, as long as you have other tools, which they are giving in the PvP talents, I believe, like Priest, when they Psychic Scream, they go immune to crowd control. Preservation Evokers have more ways to Verdant Embrace, is what it seems like from my experience playing through, so they can get more Nullifying Shrouds to immune crowd control. Like, your own personal immunity is a lot less frustrating than, like, an interrupt that prevents the player from doing anything at all, because crowd control is another big one, right? And even classes like Shadow Priest that are, they're losing their stun, they still feel very effective, and I think that's because of the changing to the pacing of the game. You don't need to blanket crowd control a healer for 10 seconds straight in order to take a target down before it gets healed back to full health, because it doesn't get healed back to full health in the 1 millisecond that they're not in crowd control. You have more time to ramp up, more time to push into a better position, or more time to switch to a different target, and the gameplay seems to be a lot more simplified and understandable. Like when you're fighting against a Resto Druid, don't attack the Life Blooms, because Life Bloom has a new mechanic where it stacks up on the target over time, puts efflorescence under the target, and it becomes less susceptible to purge, because those stacks of Life Bloom will get purged one at a time. So you do want to consider switching targets, and the Resto Druid knows you want to do that. So how are they going to play around that? And it feels a lot more interactive. So you can see, like, at this point, I have multiple targets at low health, but I just got feared. And if this is retail, I'd be worried about them just falling over and dead, but I have a little bit more time to react, think about where my Soul to Force is going to go, think about where my Swiftmens are going to go, and how close am I to the next big cooldown that I have in order to recover. And look how much intensity there is, right? 3 targets on our team, 40% health. Their Warlock, 30% health. It's like we're racing to the finish, trying to buy time with the globals here, but we're not just immediately toppling over. Like I could probably drop a global or two and still have at least a little bit more time. Now, if it was played perfectly on both sides, then you might not be able to. But as far as like a beginner into arena, you have way more time to react. So I think that it's moving in a good direction overall. I think that the improvements that they're making are good, and I think as long as we keep submitting the feedback for things like I've just pointed out, like the new addition of the cooldowns, and maybe move crowd control icons to the left of the frame as well, so just more clearly displayed, and maybe even give them those icons a border, and then you could put a tip when you log in, like, if this frame here is appearing, it means this target is crowd controlled, so be more careful, or consider the utility that your class has. Like, just general tips and advice for basic entry level players, so that when they're joining in, the information that's on the screen makes more sense, right? Because a lot of time, if you haven't played the game before, you've not played it in a long time, you zone in, you might be feeling like you're looking at like a pilot's, like an airplane display at the front. You don't know what any of the knobs do, and you're just like, what's going on? So just incorporating more things into the game that help highlight and display the functions of these things, I think is going to be critical as far as trying to get more people into the space or into the mode. And that would be the same for PvE as well, right? Like, if a boss is an important mechanic or spell, which is something that they have been working on with the improvements of the mechanic visuals, and kind of reducing the amount of bloat as far as spell animations, or quote unquote like unicorn vomit. I feel like those are all like really bad mechanics that we've seen so far in the game. But I will say at this point, because I've had my frustrations, right? But it was mostly because of the bugs. Mostly because of the bugs, I've had my frustrations. Now that the bugs are actually out of the way, I actually feel like I'm testing what they intend to be tested. And now it's just a matter of number tuning, maybe going back and giving a couple spells back, or maybe even going in and taking away a few spells depending on the spec in that regard. But as far as hitting their goals, I feel like they're getting closer and closer with every step. So I'm really hoping that I wish them the best vacation so they can recover, come back, have a good time with their families, and then get in here, and then on the final stretch, we can have everything that we really want for the expansion. And it does feel like the right time also, even though we've seen ability pruning in the past, and then later on people are like, no, we need to add the spells back. I feel like they're going to be more receptive this time around to when that moment is happening. But if this is the best opportunity for them to get new players, returning players that might be rusty, I feel like slowing down the game, slowing down the global cooldown intensity, and slowing down the ramp of how fast somebody dies is probably the wise thing to do right now, to kind of bring them back into the ropes and catch them up to things. And then as things move on, and if it's too boring, then that's when you can readjust into the future. But I think with the steps that they're taking, it looks good. And especially as somebody who I've kind of fallen out of love of Resto Druid. It used to be my main, but I'm starting to actually like it again. So I'm probably going to be getting into it a lot more. I actually personally liked the double Swiftmen gameplay where you consume a hot and then have to think about where you're going to allocate it and think about which hot you're going to consume. I felt like that gameplay was interesting for me as far as trying to plan out my next action, and which would be the most effective without allowing that one target to die, with the fact that they've reduced all of the hots, so you don't have to be juggling 16 hots at the same time while you're doing everything. So I actually enjoyed the rework now. Now that the one-shots are gone. When the one-shots were in there and I was like, what is going on? I can't keep up with anything. It was very frustrating, but now it feels a lot better. So those are my experiences so far with the Midnight Beta. Rough start, but things I think are moving. They're moving steadily along. I think we're in a good spot now to get some good effective testing while they're on vacation. And then when they get back, they can kind of put the final nails in for what needs to be here on release. But like this moment right here, everybody's low. What's going on? Who's going to die first? We drop them. We take 5 wins and we get out of the lobby. And I think likely that is their goal for the experience across the whole game, whether it's dungeons, raids, or PvP. So I hope you guys enjoyed this discussion and this breakdown for the next expansion. Thank you guys very much for watching and all of your continued support. And I will see you in the next one.